So my next bit of advice is to recognise the strengths of the medium for which you're writing. Now, graphic fiction is often talked about in the language of film. So we talk about transitions, wide shots, close-ups, reveals. All of this is visual writing terminology. However, graphic fiction doesn't have the same capacity to use sound or movement that film does. So if you try and treat it purely as film, you're going to get an inferior product. Now, when you engage with a story that's taking place on screen, that story flows into you at the rate at which is dictated by the people who made that film or TV programme. There's no chance for you to digest it at your own pace or to look back at perhaps things on previous pages that were of interest that might become relevant later on. Now, in some senses this is a strength because it requires less work on the part of the audience. They don't have to engage their imagination, it is merely there put in front of them. They just look at the screen, they don't have to interpret words and fill in the images in their head. However, it does mean that it's very difficult to lay down subtleties early on in the film that then become relevant and significant later on, because it's not like you rewind just to see there was something you missed in the background, or a key phrase that was said earlier on that now has suddenly more relevance. You simply digest the story at the rate at which you're told to digest it. And so when it comes to something like Life of Pi, if you've read that book, you'll know that part of the beauty of it is that as the story begins to unravel, things that are early on start to become more relevant and poignant. So you want to turn back and you want to check and see how it reads with this new knowledge. Now, when this is turned into a film, it doesn't really work, and so I didn't like the film. But there you go. Now, because of the format which you're telling the story in when you're using graphic fiction, you are able to fill those panels with really nice attention to detail if you want to slow down the reader's eye so they can soak in all that moment. And if you want to speed up the reader's eye, then you can use less detail, and perhaps in action sequences and things like that, you pull the reader's eye over the page very quickly. But because of the ability of the reader to control the pace and to look back at things that they perhaps might find more relevant to once they get some information further on in the story, because you can do that, you can use a lot of foreshadowing and subtext that can be very subtle and very cleverly used. And this can add a much greater depth to the story. Now, because we're still working in a visual medium, we can still capitalise on that immediate impact that an image has when used in film, which in a book you might have to take some time to describe, and so the revelation would happen at a much slower rate. Whereas in a film, you cut to the next scene and bam, something hits the eye. That's possible in graphic fiction by using reveals effectively. So you might want to slow down or speed up the reader's eye with your attention to detail, and then with the turn of the page, you can hit with a really powerful image that just leaps off the page. So in order to start to get to grips with the devices and possibilities that are available to you when you're writing for graphic fiction, I'd recommend reading a lot of graphic fiction. Just read as much and as varied the sort of styles as you can, and pay attention to how your eyes falling over the page and what devices the artist and the writer have been employing in order to tell the story. It's important to recognise graphic fiction and comics as a writing craft in its own right, and not compare it too closely to other mediums, because this can be detrimental to the end product.